Elizabeth is a princess whose life gets turned upside down during a royal banquet. Out of nowhere, her fiancé, Prince Friar, publicly announces that he's breaking off their engagement because he claims Elizabeth pushed his beloved Sylvie down the stairs. The accusation completely blindsides her because she never did anything of the sort. Unfortunately, Friar is far more interested in showing off than listening to the truth. As if humiliating her in front of everyone wasn't enough, he also orders her to be locked away in the dungeon. The saddest part is that Elizabeth had spent years doing everything she could to become the perfect future queen. She even took over the prince's duties while he skipped work to attend parties. Her maid constantly begged her to rest, but Elizabeth always stayed up late finishing reports because she believed she was helping both Friar and the kingdom. She even convinced herself she worked better without him around. But Elizabeth wasn't doing it for the prince alone. She genuinely cared about the kingdom's people. Alongside handling royal affairs, she secretly ran the successful Funnel Corporation, using its profits to create jobs and help the poor. The townspeople admired the company's mysterious owner, never realizing it was Elizabeth herself. She preferred staying anonymous because helping others mattered more to her than receiving praise. The next morning, Prince Friar finally drags himself into her office with another ridiculous request. He wants the Geico Group to gain access to the royal treasury. Elizabeth immediately refuses after discovering the company had been secretly skimming profits. Giving them access to the treasury would put the kingdom's finances at serious risk. Friar throws a tantrum because he wants to impress his new friends and orders Elizabeth to approve the request, reminding her she's just his fiancée. Elizabeth refuses to back down, knowing the law is on her side and protecting the kingdom is more important than protecting his ego. After he storms off, Elizabeth asks his knight, Robert, to keep an eye on the prince before someone manipulates him into making even worse decisions. She knows that one reckless choice could drag the entire kingdom into decline, and ordinary people would suffer the consequences. Later, Elizabeth finally finishes her work and prepares to enjoy a rare day off. She asks her maid, Michelle, to ready the carriage. But before she can leave, her father arrives with urgent news. The king and the chancellor must attend an emergency meeting about increasing monster activity, leaving Elizabeth to handle the kingdom's upcoming anniversary celebration on her own. Elizabeth quickly realizes the problem. The meeting takes place during the kingdom's anniversary celebration. She suggests canceling the event, but her father explains that's impossible because guests from distant lands are already on their way. Instead, the king has decided to leave the entire celebration in Elizabeth's hands. She is completely shocked and tries to refuse, but her father tells her the king trusts no one more than her. With that kind of confidence placed on her shoulders, saying no isn't really an option. So, she quietly accepts the responsibility, even though her relaxing day off disappears before it even begins. While preparing for the anniversary celebration, Michelle spots Prince Friar openly flirting with Sylvie. She's furious that he's cheating on Elizabeth. But Elizabeth doesn't mind since it's common for princes to have multiple partners. Her only concern is that Sylvie, who was recently adopted into a noble family, still lacks proper royal etiquette and could damage the kingdom's reputation. To prevent future problems, Elizabeth invites Sylvie for tea. She politely explains that if she wants to be with the prince, she must behave responsibly because her actions affect both the prince's reputation and the kingdom's image. Elizabeth also mentions the injury on Sylvie's leg, knowing she got it while secretly meeting another nobleman. Instead of exposing her, Elizabeth simply tells Sylvie to stop cheating on the prince, since she has no interest in their messy relationship and only wants to protect the kingdom. Sylvie apologizes, but the moment she leaves, her innocent act disappears. Furious that Elizabeth uncovered her secret, she spots Prince Friar, bursts into fake tears, pretends to fall, and falsely accuses Elizabeth of attacking her. Back at the banquet, Elizabeth denies the accusation and reminds Friar that causing a scene in front of foreign guests will only disgrace the royal family. But the prince refuses to listen, declares Elizabeth guilty of trying to murder Sylvie, and orders her to be thrown into the dungeon. Neither Elizabeth nor the guards understand what is happening, but Robert, the prince's loyal knight, has no choice but to obey his master's orders. As Elizabeth is forced to the ground, she catches Sylvie wearing a smug little smile. At that moment, everything clicks. She realizes Sylvie planned this from the very beginning and successfully framed her. Almost everyone watching can tell the accusation is complete nonsense. But with the king and Elizabeth's father away, Prince Friar holds the highest authority in the castle. No one dares challenge his command, so Elizabeth quietly accepts her fate and walks to the dungeon without resisting. When news finally reaches the king, he is completely stunned. He can't believe his own son threw the kingdom's most capable woman into prison over such a ridiculous accusation. His first instinct is to rush back and set Elizabeth free while giving Friar the scolding of a lifetime. But then Elizabeth's father does something far more disappointing. Instead of standing up for his daughter, he convinces the king not to return, saying there is no need to waste time over the situation. In other words, he leaves Elizabeth to deal with the mess all by herself. Trusting his judgment, the king reluctantly agrees. A whole month passes with Elizabeth locked inside the dungeon. At first, she thinks prison might finally give her a chance to relax. Unfortunately, Prince Friar somehow finds a way to ruin even that. Despite locking her up, he continues dumping piles of government paperwork on her as if prison were just another office with worse lighting. One day, Michelle secretly sneaks into the dungeon using magic to avoid being seen. Elizabeth casually puts the guard to sleep with hypnosis, proving she could have escaped whenever she wanted. She asks Michelle whether the king or her father has finally decided to fix this misunderstanding. Instead, Michelle delivers another painful blow. Elizabeth's own father was the one who argued against helping her. Hearing that finally opens old wounds because he has always pushed difficult responsibilities onto her while avoiding them himself. As if that wasn't bad enough, Michelle reveals that Prince Friar has also started targeting Funnel Corporation. He has labeled it the company of a traitor and plans to replace all of Elizabeth's carefully chosen executives with his own clueless followers. Elizabeth immediately realizes this will destroy the company and hurt the kingdom's economy. Michelle can't understand why Elizabeth still worries about a kingdom that has treated her like a disposable tool. Elizabeth admits she's furious about being betrayed by Friar, framed by Sylvie, and abandoned by her own father. But she insists that none of it is the fault of the ordinary people, and she doesn't want innocent citizens to suffer because of their leaders' mistakes. Then Michelle shares one final piece of news. Prince Friar and his inner circle have been spreading false rumors that Elizabeth tried to assassinate Sylvie so she could seize control of the kingdom. They have absolutely no evidence, yet the public has started believing every word. The same people Elizabeth spent years helping are now insulting her without knowing the truth. That is the final straw. For the first time in her life, Elizabeth decides she's done sacrificing herself for people who never appreciated her. She slams her fist into the wall, finally letting out all the frustration she's bottled up for years. Then she thanks Michelle for helping her realize how foolish she's been. She could have escaped this prison at any moment. She simply chose not to. In this world, everyone possesses mana, but only a select few can summon powerful divine artifacts. These magical treasures can take many forms, from swords to spears. Elizabeth's divine artifact is far more impressive. It appears as 7 magical grimoires, and one of them allows her to record and recreate virtually any kind of magic. When she's finally ready to leave, Elizabeth creates an ice clone to remain in the prison so no one notices her escape right away. Then she secretly crosses the border and visits Viscount Lucas of the neighboring empire. Lucas still can't believe Prince Friar threw away someone as talented as Elizabeth. Anyone with half a brain could see she was the real reason the kingdom had prospered for years, and he often wished someone with her abilities worked for his empire instead. So when Elizabeth suddenly appears at his doorstep, Lucas can barely believe his eyes. She tells him she has had enough of being used and asks for asylum in the empire. Realizing this is an opportunity too good to refuse, Lucas gladly accepts her. He then asks what she plans to do next. Elizabeth gives him a calm smile before revealing her answer. She's going to tear down everything she spent years building for the kingdom that betrayed her. Elizabeth wasn't planning to charge straight into the kingdom with swords blazing. Her goal was much smarter than that. Since the empire and the kingdom were already destined to become enemies, she decided to work with the empire. But she had no intention of using them like disposable pawns. If they helped her destroy the kingdom, they would also benefit from everything she achieved. A fair trade for both sides. Thanks to Viscount Lucas's crest, the carriage passed through the kingdom's gates without anyone realizing Elizabeth was hiding inside. Lucas planned to take her to his territory near the kingdom's border, where he could keep an eye on her for a while. Elizabeth actually appreciated how quickly he acted. If they had waited any longer, even Lucas might not have been able to leave the kingdom safely. Curious, Lucas asked whether all of this was possible because of Elizabeth's divine artifact. She showed him her grimoire and claimed it could record every book she touched and every piece of information she saw or heard. Since she had spent years surrounded by the kingdom's political secrets, Lucas immediately wondered if she had military plans or confidential records stored inside it. Elizabeth guessed the royal castle was already in complete panic over her disappearance, so she had no problem sharing some information. After all, from her point of view, she was now a refugee. But here's the twist: there was no such thing as the Grimoire of Wisdom. Elizabeth's real divine artifact was actually the 7 grimoires. She simply revealed a tiny fraction of one of them, the grimoire Lucifer, and both her father and the king completely bought the story. Talk about selling a lie with confidence. To thank Lucas for helping her, Elizabeth promised him a reward so enormous that the bounty for turning her in would look like pocket change. Once they reached Lucas's territory, she revealed her next move. She wanted to start a business and asked him to lend her 100 gold coins. To make him feel safe, she even drafted a magical contract. Within 1 year, she would repay double the amount. If she failed, she would willingly become his slave, giving him complete ownership over her. It sounded completely insane, but Elizabeth looked so confident that she practically acted like the mountain of gold was already sitting on his table. The building she picked for her company, however, looked like it had lost a fight with time. Even her maid, Mai, wondered if her lady had accidentally chosen an abandoned ruin instead of an office. When Elizabeth pushed the front door, it literally fell off its hinges. Well, at least the renovation had officially begun. After several days of cleaning and repairs, the building was finally ready. Elizabeth proudly named it the Trader Commercial Firm. Soon after, Mitty returned from town with a list of the empire's most influential nobles. Elizabeth realized they didn't have enough workers or equipment to mass-produce luxury cosmetics yet, so she decided to start with something everyone needed: soap. And not just any soap. This version was noticeably better than the soap already sold throughout the empire. It wasn't the final goal, but it was the perfect first step toward building a powerful company. Next, Elizabeth asked her maid to contact a few important people while she visited the Church of Libris to pray for the success of her new business. During her visit, 2 little boys burst inside, excitedly telling the priest they had earned lots of money that day before running off again. The priest explained that he also ran the orphanage next door, but keeping it open had become incredibly difficult. The children knew how hard he was struggling, so they had started pulling weeds around town and cleaning the military barracks just to help support the orphanage. The priest felt guilty for relying on them, but Elizabeth reassured him that the children were simply trying to repay his kindness. She then donated several gold coins. To her, this wasn't just charity, it was smart business. Every child would grow into a future customer someday, and supporting the people raising them was simply a long-term investment. That evening, Mitty returned with good news. She had successfully delivered free soap samples to the maids working in noble households. With sales starting the next day, Elizabeth's strategy was simple. Instead of selling to everyone, she would carefully choose her customers. The soap would cost just a little more than the competitors, making it feel like a premium product. Her real goal wasn't quick profit. It was making the Trader Commercial Firm a respected brand while quietly building relationships with the empire's most powerful families. And just like that, the first step of her revenge began. 3 months later, the plan was working perfectly. Soap sales kept climbing, and customers were now placing orders for toner, skin lotion, and shampoo as well. Even then, Elizabeth refused to flood the market. Every new customer was carefully investigated first, and if they passed her inspection, they were only allowed to buy limited quantities. Sometimes, making people wait is the fastest way to make them want your product even more. As usual, Elizabeth handed Mitty some money to donate to Father Louis and several local charities before the two of them headed out for a meal. While they ate, Elizabeth reminded Mitty to keep a close eye on their competitors and, most importantly, never let the soap formula leak. Right now, that recipe was the company's greatest weapon. Part of it was locked inside the firm's safe, while the rest was kept by Elizabeth herself. Unfortunately, someone at the next table had very sharp ears. The director had been losing customers month after month because the trader commercial firm kept stealing the spotlight. Even though Elizabeth only sold to a carefully selected group of buyers, those buyers happened to be the empire's most influential socialites. Their recommendations carried so much weight that anyone who openly attacked Trader Commercial risked making powerful nobles their enemies. A man named Grants secretly listened to their conversation before reporting everything to the director of a rival company. When Grants revealed where the soap formula was supposedly stored, the director thought he had hit the jackpot. He paid Grants for the information, told him to disappear for a while, and immediately began plotting. His plan wasn't just to copy the soap. He also wanted to claim he had obtained genuine trader's soap through secret channels and sell it for several times the original price. Talk about turning theft into a business strategy. A few days later, Elizabeth received a report from the kingdom's capital. Sylvia had officially become engaged to Prince Frey, and Elizabeth herself had been declared a traitor. She knew exactly who was behind it: her own father. Duke Leiston cared more about protecting the royal family than protecting his own daughter. As long as Elizabeth remained free, he was willing to sacrifice her reputation to preserve the crown prince's honor. The news filled Elizabeth with anger, but she refused to lose focus. Her revenge was already underway, and when the time finally came, she intended to leave the kingdom with nothing but regrets. Before she could dwell on it any longer, the office doors suddenly burst open. Art Hildegarde from the Merchants Guild's legal department marched inside with several officials. They had come to arrest Elizabeth after receiving reports that Trader Commercial was selling poisonous soap that had left customers with painful burns and sores. At the guild headquarters, Elizabeth calmly presented her records. Her documents showed that her soap contained nothing dangerous, and, more importantly, the supposed victims had never even bought products from her company. When Art examined the suspicious soap, it certainly looked like Trader's soap at first glance, but the poor craftsmanship immediately gave it away. Elizabeth quickly realized what had happened. Someone had stolen part of the recipe and tried to recreate it. Luckily for her, the thieves had made one fatal mistake. The complete formula had never been stored in one place. Half of it remained locked inside the company's safe, while Elizabeth carried the other half herself. Anyone using only the stolen portion would end up creating a dangerous product instead of the real thing. It was the perfect trap for anyone foolish enough to steal it. Elizabeth then asked Art to question the victims about where they had actually purchased the fake soap. After hearing the evidence, Art realized that Trader Commercial wasn't the criminal, it was the victim. She apologized to Elizabeth and immediately went after the real culprit. Soon afterward, the rival company's director, Gazaru Jackman, was brought before the guild. Elizabeth demanded compensation for stealing her formula, damaging her company's reputation, and selling dangerous counterfeit products. Gazaru admitted everything but smugly refused to pay. According to him, the Merchants Guild had no authority to force compensation. He mocked Elizabeth, saying her only option was to ask a judge from the Church of Libris, and he doubted anyone would take the complaints of a young girl seriously. Unfortunately for Gazaru, his confidence didn't last very long. Father Louis was already standing in the room. Speaking in the name of the church, Father Louis ordered Gazaru to make amends for his crimes. Elizabeth didn't waste the opportunity. Instead of asking for a simple payment, she demanded everything Gazaru Commercial's management rights, his personal assets, and every piece of equipment, material, and staff belonging to the company. Safe to say, Gazaru's business career ended faster than he expected. One moment he was trying to steal Elizabeth's success, and the next he was handing over his entire company. That's one expensive bar of soap. I heard that you addicted to these hands now, girl.